Yeah. All right. Um, this is, whoops, got it. Sorry. This is Erin Hunter, and she is an illustrator and artist, and she's mostly does botanicals, but she does a whole lot else. Animals, insects. She does fine art, and she also works with her computer to do different types of illustrations for companies. She has shows pretty much all around the Bay Area. One is currently in PG. So if you want to go see some of her work, and she's going to give us as much information as we can hold in her time limit. So I'm going to turn it over to Erin. Thank you for doing this for us, Erin. Well,
Hello, thank you. I'm excited to be here. Um, so I am, as Jolene said, I'm an illustrator. I'm specifically a science illustrator. So my day-to-day work is working for an academic publisher in the Bay Area called Annual Reviews. It's a nonprofit scientific publisher. And so day-to-day, what I'm doing is working with scientists to, I take their illustrations and I make them more easily understood, more professional looking. Sometimes that means just switching the labels so that they conform to the graphic standards of all the other volumes, and sometimes it's taking a drawing that is done in pencil on the back of another piece of paper and rendering that. And it's right now I've just finished up working on the volume of entomology, so I've been illustrating bugs all summer, so that's been really fun. And I'm moving into food science, and then I'll probably start working on animal biosciences. So I have a really interesting range of work there. It's very, very technical. So to counterbalance that, I do that 4 days a week, and on Fridays I paint. And so I paint pollinator themed sort of botanical portraits. This is actually a print and not the original, because the original is on display in Pacific Grove right now at the Museum of Natural History, but this is the style I paint in when I'm doing my own thing. So it's still sort of informed by science and driven by science, but it's a lot more fine art focused. So I do those things. I also sometimes teach. I'm going to be teaching next summer at CSUMB. I'm going to be teaching a 2-week botanical illustration class. I'm teaching a class at Denver Botanical Garden, an online class next spring at like a weekend workshop. And then I sell prints and note cards and stickers of my work. So I just showed you that image there. That's a fine art giclée print of an original painting. I also make note cards of the same things. And I thought I grabbed the sticker of that image, but I grabbed a different one. So this is from a different painting, and this is the sticker that goes with it. So I'm always interested in ways in
are
which,
you cutting that sticker out yourself?
no, there's a company called, am I holding it the right way? Mule Sticker.
Mule?
Mule Sticker, and they will do these die cut stickers. You can get them clear, or you can get them, I think this might be a clear one. This is where I need my kids to do this because they're a lot faster at peeling stickers than I am, but they're the vinyl stickers that can go through the dishwasher, so they're really high quality. And these I sell wholesale, and I sell them through my website. So I have a lot of moving parts, and it's a lot to keep track of, but I really, really like it. Even though I don't seem like it necessarily, I have a lot of energy and I like to do a lot of different kinds of things. So my background is that I majored in graphic design and I minored in Spanish in college. I don't have a science background at all. After graduation, I worked as a graphic designer and an art director, and then I moved to New York for a couple of years because I just had a bee in my bonnet and it was time to do something that was not on the straight and narrow. And I just worked retail, and I took night classes, and I did odd jobs. I freelanced, and then I started applying to graduate school, and I kept getting rejected over and over and over again until I found out about this little program in Santa Cruz at UC Santa Cruz called the Science Illustration Program. This program's now at CSUMB. I applied to that program and I got in. So all the weird drawings and things that did not fit into these other MFA programs were a pretty good fit for the science illustration program, because it turns out that the thing that I was doing with my strange collection of like paintings of carnivorous plants and drawings of people sleeping on benches in Brooklyn or whatever were all observational. And so when I brought that to the science illustration program, it was more a matter of elevating the skill that I had instead of like trying to develop something. The thing that needed developing was kind of already there, and then the skill level was developed. So I learned to be a really detailed draftsman and painter in that program. And I kind of settled into the things that I love painting the most, which are pollinators and plants and floral visitors, that kind of thing. And then working in digital media came really easily to me because of my graphic design background. But then when it came to more traditional media, acrylic has turned out to be my favorite medium. And this was really kind of driven home when I did some children's books. And when you need to turn around some illustrations when you're getting close to your deadline, acrylic is the name of the game. So
Covers a lot of errors.
covers a lot of errors. And at the time when I did my first one, we were living in Pacific Grove, and there's nothing like waiting for watercolor to dry in Pacific Grove. It just is. It takes its time, whereas acrylic would, like, you can paint as fast as you need to. So that is what I paint in even now. I've been painting on a watercolor paper, and I have a little demo set up for that today. Painting watercolor style, but in acrylic on hot press watercolor paper. As I've started getting bigger and bigger with the pieces that I've been painting, I'm transitioning over to painting on gessoed board. Because the last big painting I did, I ended up having some buckling in my paper around the edges. As much as I tried to manage it by sizing it, by taping it down, it was just such a big piece of, and it was heavy paper. It was such a big piece of paper that I couldn't control the buckling. So that's going to be a new exciting chapter for me on the next big piece I do. So I can talk a little bit more about, I can do a little demo right now, or I can talk a little bit more about the different ways that I use that, like create art and kind of get it out there. Do you have a preference?
No, you can, no, whatever you're comfortable with.
Let's do a little demo, and then I can talk a little bit more about what I would do with a piece of artwork afterwards.
Excellent.
So I'm going to share my screen. Did it work? Nope. That wasn't the one. Let me try again.
Erin has started to it says you are.
But I think it's sharing.
It worked a minute ago.
I know. Let's stop sharing. Okay. Oh, I think my phone went to sleep. Maybe that's why. Now let's try. There we go. Okay. So this is a drawing that I like to draw on tracing paper. This is my original drawing. It's of a Matilla hippopi, and I know it's probably a little challenging to see.
That how you say that?
What's that?
I do
Matilla, yes, or also known as fried egg flower.
Yep.
Or Romnia. I have an entire drawer in my flat file full of hundreds and hundreds of these kind of tissue paper drawings. It's my favorite thing to draw on because it erases so easily, it's inexpensive, and I really like to incorporate a lot of different elements into a painting. So I will cut these out and layer them on top of each other. And because I wanted to preserve this one, because I think it's a nice drawing, I scanned it, and I'm transferring it to a piece of hot press watercolor paper, which I've taped down, and I've mostly, here I'll zoom in so you can see a little better. I have mostly drawn it in, but I have left the bottom petal so I can demonstrate how I do that. I'm transferring with a piece of graphite paper, kind of like the old credit card receipts. And so I just have that down. And then I take my mechanical pencil. This is a 0.3 lead. And I just trace
Very small.
very small. And it has to be a hard lead, but not too hard. Because if
And it
it's
doesn't
too hard,
smear underneath there?
that's why I use such a small piece, because if you use a bigger piece, the weight of your hand will transfer the graphite and it's really hard to get off the paper.
Yeah, yeah.
And I did and see, I don't even want to press down on it, so I like lift it up with my pencil before I grab it. There's my drawing, and I actually don't draw in all of the little wrinkles,
Right.
because then I wouldn't be able to, there we go. Then I don't want to be fighting those. This is 300 pound, which I like. It's when I've used the 140 pound, it just is too thin and it tends to buckle a little bit.
With the acrylic.
Yes, I use Liquitex. And some of these are old. And
Yeah.
this one, my husband found this at a garage sale. That I'll show you. I use not very much at a time. This is really, really thick because it's.
Now, do you use water to thin it down, or do you use
do.
a medium?
No, I don't use a medium, and that's partially just there was a guy named Sean Gould who came and did a demo when I was a grad student, and all he used was water. And he said, I just try to get it to about the thickness of sour cream. And so that's kind of my guiding principle. Some of these are heavy body. I don't think I have any soft body here. I think these are all heavy body. You can see this one, the label fell off, so my daughter wrote in a label for me. So I'm using a brilliant yellow, a Hansa yellow light. I've got dioxazine purple, a little Payne's gray, and then I have white, but I don't know that I'm gonna use it yet. And I have some alizarin crimson, which I'm gonna try a little experiment with in a bit. You'll see I'm not using very much, and that's because acrylic does not wake back up. When it dries, it's done. It turns, it's very plasticky. So you can't really use it over again. Here is my collection of miniature brushes that I love. You can tell which ones have been used by the younger members of my household.
Oh, yeah.
And I tend to use small brushes even from the get-go. When I have a reference image, I love to draw and paint from life, but that's just not always realistic. So I do have a reference photo here that I'm working from as I'm getting going on this. Here's my paper towel, and I always have a paper towel as well. I'll zoom out a little so you can see. So I usually start by just blocking in color. Gosh, this is super thick and dry right now. So you can see how thin it is. And with yellows, I'm not modifying it at all. So I get this going. And I'm actually just going to wet this area to start with. All these stamens are going to be a super bright golden yellow.
Do you blend it all like watercolor with acrylics?
Yes, and I'm going to show that in
Later.
in a bit. I will get to a point, I may not have time to do like more dry brush style stuff with this.
Right.
Actually, I will, because I'm going to do the petals. So while that's drying, I'm going to start, I'm going to mix up some color for the shadows of the petals, which are quite crinkly. And I, when I'm painting in white or yellow, I have to be really diligent, because I tend to be somebody who overworks things. I have to be really diligent not to add too much color too quickly. And I want to use a color that will look lively, but not too colorful, because it's meant to read white. So I could use kind of a bluish gray, but I'm gonna try and see if I can do kind of a purpley Payne's gray kind of color. See how that works. because I
Cool.
like the coolness of the Payne's gray, but I want there to be a little bit of color, and I'm using the purple as kind of a counterbalance to the yellow since they're complements. And I'm going to get it really, 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 really thin. And then
When you do your illustrations, how much leeway are you staying in the strictly botanical truth of the flower, or do you push out the color a little bit?
I push the color where it needs to be read more easily, or I'll do some of it. So there are all these little tricks that botanical artists will do. Um, as an example, while that's drying, I'll tell you. I don't think I did any of that in here, but something that you'll see an illustrator do sometimes. Can you still see me on the small screen?
Yeah.
So sometimes what they'll do is, let's say they decided that they didn't want this flower here, but they wanted to indicate that there was a flower. They would just cut it off here and show a cut edge. So I'll do things like that where I'm like, I don't have room for this, or it's too busy and I need to like, um, have things be less crowded. I will do things like that. And I also definitely will push colors, or I'll make shadows more saturated. And one thing that there's a convention in science illustration that light always comes from the upper left, and that makes everything easy to, when you're combining a lot of elements like this, you
Okay.
know where your light source is going to be consistently throughout. So that's just how my brain works now. Like I just, in my head, everything always comes, the light comes from the upper left. Oh, I like how this color is turning out. So now I'm just adding some little shadows where the petals are overlapping. And I'm probably just going to do a couple of these because I have another, I want to get to some of these stamens. It's actually a bigger brush than I normally use, but
Do you use the white of the paper?
yeah. Except for when I have started painting, like on here, I used white on the highlights of these petals where because they're quite waxy.
Yeah.
And so it looks okay to have like that hard white highlight that's sort of more plasticky looking, because this is quite a waxy, thick petal. Whereas with, let's say,
Callie, kitty, 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 kitty,
these
Callie cat.
Somebody's unmuted.
with these little monkey flowers, for example, because that's a really thin, delicate flower, I would try not to use a white highlight. So with botanicals, I tend not to use the white unless I, like,
Probably not a lot of your illustrations have white petals. So if I'm assuming if you're using acrylic and you make several colors of yellow and it becomes quite thick, is there a defining line if you left the white paper as opposed to putting or is it just real thin? Did that make sense?
I try to leave the white, but I will go back and add highlights. So as an example, when I'm painting a butterfly and there's like, especially like with swallowtails, you'll see this transition where you can see the individual scales and they go from black here to white here and they kind of blend in.
Yeah.
I will paint in those little white scales as the transition is going that way. That's a case where I think trying to reserve the white would be insane. You'd like trying to draw around that and it would look forced. And so that's the case where I would go back in with white. But also that's a really opaque, like a butterfly wing is quite opaque and velvety, and so it lends itself to having a more opaque white. If it's botanical, I'll generally try to leave it alone because I don't want to I want things to look light. And I just did this painting of all yellow flowers and it was so hard not to overwork it and not to mess with it too much, and to just have like one pass of, and doing like something like this too, doing white flowers, it's really hard to remember to leave the white paper and try not to try to
Especially
plan
when you don't
ahead.
have it drawn out.
Yeah. I usually have things pretty well mapped out before I get to this stage because I don't like to waste my good paper. Or not waste, but like I don't like to be trying to make those decisions on this paper because I want to be able to preserve the tooth of the paper and have everything look nice and not have too many mistakes, especially if I'm leaving the background white as I would for a more traditional botanical.
Gotcha.
A little more
Do
gray.
you do any value studies, or do you just do your tracing paper kind of, or do you do it on the tracing paper?
You know, if I do a value study, I did this actually before I did this little demo here because I had an idea I wanted to try, which I'm going to try in a little bit. I'll do that often in Photoshop. So
Oh,
I'll go back and forth between, because digital is so intuitive for me at this point because I've been doing it for so long that it's just another, even with traditional media, I use it as just another tool in the toolbox. And so oftentimes what I'll do is, like I'll take, what did I do recently? I had the painting of these yellow flowers and I was like, God, this part looks weird. It just like has this one stalk of lupin sticking up and it looks like a spear. Like it just didn't look right. So I took the painting into Photoshop. I did a couple other paintings. I brought those in and I plunked those in to see what they would look like in Photoshop and then color, like added a little color just to see what would happen with it. So I do things like that because then you don't have to commit.
but you do have to know how to use Photoshop.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like we all use the tools that are in front of us and that are fastest. And because I'm on my computer all the time, it's often faster for me to do something like that than other ways of doing it. So this is not my most glorious attempt at this, but I want to go back to these stamens now. Right here in the center, there's this beautiful dark shadow that I want to paint in because I can see I need to establish some darker values now so that this doesn't look so dark. And then I had an idea for something I want to do in a little bit.
Are you working on that painting? Because it's not showing you working.
Oh, it's not.
Did it freeze?
Oh, it went to
Oh,
sleep again.
you switched over. Oh, there, the phone fell asleep.
The phone fell asleep. There we go. So I'm gonna quickly go around this center, the pistil here. And this is, of course, much faster than I would normally work. I would normally be like listening to a podcast, looking at 30 pictures of Matiloa poppies instead of one. Add a little more color here. And keeping in mind see, you can see this is already dried. It's already
Oh,
done. And it's hot in my office right now. I'm upstairs, and so and I have the windows closed because there's a bunch of noisy birds and other things.
so it's hot up there.
It's warm, and then because I need to get insulated windows in here. That's too dark. And you can see I am really professional with the way I kind of just use my fingertips to get things out of the way.
I think that's very professional. Irene had asked about your pencil lines on the flower petal. Maybe she didn't see. She doesn't usually draw all of them in.
Yeah, I'll draw the whole outline of it, but I won't draw the wrinkles and things like that because they, for some things, for structures, I don't mind having a pencil line, but for a texture, I don't necessarily want it there. And for this particular thing, normally I'll come in with an eraser. This is my favorite eraser. They don't make these anymore, but this is a Tough Stuff eraser, and it will actually pick up a good bit of this pencil line. I didn't want to pick up too much of it because I wanted everyone to be able to see it. You can see it does a decent job of that. what I would probably start, I mean, I would probably render this a little bit better, but just for the sake of getting some color in these stamens, I'm gonna add a few shadows here and a few lines where the anthers, which is what holds up the anther is the tip, and then the filament is what holds up the anther, which is where the pollen comes out.
Do you enlarge like that particular spot sometimes to get all that detail that you do in your?
Yeah, I have this guy here.
Oh,
Got
excellent.
from a friend who is let's pull it over this way, a
Filter.
friend who's a calligrapher. And
Oh,
it has a light in it too. Unfortunately, this light buzzes, which drives me crazy. But yeah, I will, especially, you know, in the past few years, it's gotten a little more challenging for me to see
Oh.
detail.
the older you get, the older you get.
That's right. So I'm a little more reliant on it. And as a result, also, I'm just starting to paint things bigger and bigger, which actually I'm enjoying because there's something really impactful about seeing things that are normally small, like the physical size of a piece, and then seeing something up close, which is unexpected. So for example, I did this painting of bees, which is on display in Pacific Grove right now.
The one with the
And
honeycomb thing.
yeah, and so it's got 40 different species of native bees. And you know, people, like, the number one reaction I get to that is like, I didn't know there were so many bees.
Yeah.
And the other one is like, oh, there's so many different kinds. And I'm like, well, yeah, you can only see that if you blow things up, because some of them are so small, you just wouldn't be able to see it. So they're 3 times life size, those guys are.
How
So
long did that take you to do?
So I worked on that for like 2.5 years, but that was partially, I would have done it sooner, finished it sooner. However, COVID hit, and I had 2 kids at home, and one of them was doing school on the computer, and the other one was just like being this feral preschooler wandering around the house. And it was
I
just,
just took care of some feral kids.
yeah, so it was not easy to prioritize it because I was so tapped out at the end of the day. I was like, I don't really want to, you know,
And that was a personal one, not a paying one.
right, exactly. No one was asking me to do it, but
Yeah.
it was the centerpiece of this show up in San Francisco. And when the botanical garden, when the horticulture library opened back up and the show was back on, then I was like, okay, now I have a deadline. And then it became easier to prioritize it because then I could ask for help, and I knew, you know, what I was asking for help for, you know, like, oh, I have this deadline, and everybody understands that. And so, you know, if my husband would take the girls out and go do stuff with them, or my dad would come over and take them out, or I would just put on a movie for them. And so that's how I was able to get it done, was just oh, I hear one now. Excuse me, I'm still doing a presentation. Go downstairs. There's one more. Okay. Yes. Basic point. So that's why it took so long. And it was a big piece. It was a lot of area to cover.
Thank God you're human, Erin.
I mean, this is the thing, as I talk to more and more people, what people really like to hear is the hard thing that you did with lots of mistakes and help from other people.
Exactly.
So that piece of it, I've gotten a lot more relaxed about being interrupted by my kids or things like that, because people actually, it makes you seem more real and more like an actual person in the world instead of an idea.
And that we might aspire to be as good.
Are you done with that?
I think I need to stop messing with this for a bit and focus on some other stuff.
So
Okay.
when what you can talk while you're doing that, if you were to take this and send it to get a sticker made, do you just scan it on your computer, or do you take a photograph of it?
I go to Rick at Coastal G Clay in
Oh,
Carmel.
yeah.
and he photographs my work for me, except for when I had that giant one, it was so big and the paper was problematic. He was like, I can't do this one for you. So that one I took up to San Francisco to Hanson Digital, and they took the artwork, sandwiched it in glass, and then they photographed it that way. And it was a huge hassle. That painting taught me a lot. And one of the things I learned was my car is not big enough for these
Was
bigger.
it bigger than a full sheet?
Yeah, I ordered a big roll of Arches paper.
Oh,
Framed, it's like 4 feet square. It's 45 by 47.
oh God.
So it's a big one. And I learned a lot from that. And one of the things I learned was, like, if you're gonna work in watercolor that size, at some point you're gonna have to frame it. Well, so then the
Oh God, how much did the frame cost?
I don't even want to tell you. It was so, I almost threw up when they told me how much it was going to cost to frame it. And like scanning it was hard. And the only vehicle that we own that was big enough for it was my husband's truck. And like, so it was just such a learning experience.
There are so many steps in becoming a artist that sells their work.
Yes. Yeah. And
When you do shows, do you have to ship anything?
yes. One of the things I'm trying to work out right now is I entered a show up in Lodi, which I've done several years, but I didn't do it the past couple years because I didn't have anything new to send them, and because I was saving it all for this San Francisco show. Well, so I have stuff this year, but the woman who is in charge of the show is like, well, I can accept the artwork if you ship it, but I can't ship it back to you because I have a shoulder injury. So I'm like, okay. I'm gonna get myself to Lodi on Sunday and pick up the artwork in time, because it's an interesting, like, one year I won a ribbon in that show, and do I want to try and, like, would it be worth it, in other words? Like, it
Right,
would be really
is
cool
it a
to
big
meet.
enough show?
Yeah, and it was, it's always cool to meet people and like kind of get yourself out there and stuff, but like, how am I gonna get myself up there? Like, it just becomes a whole other thing. This
So
was
what you're working on is the background.
yeah, I thought it would be a really cool Christmas card to have a Matilla poppy on a like reddish background. So this is what I was mocking up in Photoshop earlier. I was like, is this Christmassy enough? So
And
now what I'm doing, this is still acrylic, and I'm blending this edge with just water, and it's behaving like watercolor for the most part
because it's so thin.
because it's so thin. And then this is all dry here. So I'm able to go over it, and now that's not quite as dark as I want it, so I'll just keep.
So you work in a lot of layers.
I do, yeah. Which I enjoy.
You're a little bit type A.
I just love it. It's not even, I don't even know that because in my world, I am not actually the most persnickety person, like in the world of science illustration. Also because I'm not a fine artist, and because I'm not a scientist, I'm much more, my brain is much more sort of commercial in how it thinks. It's very deadline driven. And
Okay.
so I'm not, in my like little circle of science illustrators, I am like, especially botanical artists, oh my gosh, they would be like keeling over with some of the stuff I'm doing right now, I'm sure. So there's a scale, and I'm on, actually, I'm not a relaxed artist necessarily, but I'm less particular.
And some.
Precise is the word I guess I would use.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Some of these, one thing I'm thinking right now, as I'm looking at these stamens, is I have these, here's the one that I want. I have these microns that I like to use, and if this is dry, I can actually go back and use some micron in there for the edges of the anthers.
And that paint is thin enough that will
Yeah.
go up.
Well, this is a pigment-based ink too, and it's pretty good about going on top of things. So I can come in here and kind of sharpen up this edge. Because I get to a point sometimes where I'm like, I just don't trust that I can paint this the way I want it. So I'll
Gotcha.
draw it. Because a friend of mine pointed this out to me once, and I always think about it. She said, you know, if you think about it, you've just logged in so many more hours in your life drawing than you have painting, which is true. Because like when I was a little kid, I wasn't painting, I was drawing. And so sometimes when I get to, especially as I'm getting close to a deadline or like I'm getting to a point where I don't want to make any mistakes, I'll start pulling out my microns, or like I'll use my mechanical pencil depending on what part. Like I'll probably come back here. And I would clean this edge here.
Is that pencil?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And you can see my really awful
Wow.
pen hold that still drives my mother crazy.
Do you have a big bump on your thumb? I used to have a big bump on
Yeah. I have arthritis in this knuckle here
yeah,
too.
join the club.
This whole thing. Yeah.
Does your hand lock up once in a while too?
No, it's rheumatoid arthritis, so it's more like it flares and goes just depending on what's going on. Sometimes I'll use this too for adding some of these little tiny Matillaha poppies are so wrinkly.
Yeah.
And I'll come in with this pencil and kind of add some of these. Because the great thing about pencil is that you can come back then and make it really light.
So it's just a hint.
Yeah.
And you just leave that on there.
Yep.
When you have them printed, what do you send them? A JPEG or a?
Well, I typeset it all. So I'll show you what my cards look like. So this is the front. And then on the back, I typeset all this and then I write, you know, I don't
Right.
always write a little thing about what this is, but you know, like what the card is, and then they're all blank and they're printed on recycled cardstock. And then there's my dog bark. And then I use these craft envelopes, and I have compostable sleeves that here I'll zoom out, that I package them in.
And so that same company does the cards too?
No, these I get printed locally at Minuteman Press over on Foam Street.
Okay.
And they do these little guys for me too. So they print these, and then so I have one company that I order these standard size envelopes from, and then these other ones, these small guys, see if I have an open one, I don't. These small square ones I order from this this woman on Etsy.
Oh, she makes them.
Yeah, she makes them out of, I don't know what she makes them out of, but she'll always send little fun little extras, and they'll be like old maps or phone books or things like that. So she makes these little miniature envelopes. And then I do make postcards too. So this was my postcard for my show in San Francisco. And Minuteman Press printed these as well, because it was very, San Francisco Botanical is really working on reducing the amount of paper they use. So I was like, well, I still want to do a postcard, but I knew it had to be on recycled paper. But what traditionally I have done in the past is I use Modern Postcard, and I get these. You can see these have a finish on them. So they're pretty durable because I carry them around in my purse and I mail them. I always include these in my orders when I, you know, when I sell artwork or sell note cards or whatever, and I ship them, I always include these. And people put them on their fridge.
Nice. Yeah. I've ordered from moo.com, which I don't know the price difference, but they seem to be have a lot of different sizes and you know, shiny and not shiny, that kind of thing too.
Yeah.
Do you like are there certain ones that have recycled paper and certain that don't, or do you find that kind of everybody's doing that now?
I don't know if modern postcard is. I find that I like using the local printer because I like to be able to do a press check, especially for something like this, where the color, less so with this one, but like I just did the piece with yellow flowers, and yellow is so hard to get right.
Yeah,
So like when I printed these little guys, I really wanted to be there to make sure the yellow wasn't blown out and it wasn't undersaturated. I really wanted it to be the right color. So when I print with Modern Postcard, they'll send a digital proof or they will mail you a digital proof, but it adds days onto it.
yeah.
And I'm never on time enough to order, that far in advance. And so for me to be able to have somebody local print it and be able to pick the paper and feel the paper, and the printer is someone, he used to be at a couple other he used to be at Cypress Press, so I've known him for like 15 years and we've worked together a long time. I like to be able to, like, he knows, like he can get quotes from me and things like that because he knows what I'm looking for and he knows what kind of paper I like and all that kind of stuff. So I like I'm paying probably a little bit more, but also the kind of people who are buying cards of native flowers and butterflies and things tend to be the sort of people who like to see that the card was printed on recycled paper, so it's worth it to pay a little more. And then, again, to be able to have a little more control over the color and things like that, because you spend all that time getting the color in your painting right, you want it to look good on a thing that you're selling as well. I'm gonna come back to these stamens.
They don't, and that's standard operating procedure to go check it. That's not the,
I mean, for me, it is. That's as I used to do when I was a graphic designer. That was part of my job because I worked with a design house, and we did promotional materials for colleges and universities.
uh-huh.
And so I would go like the search books and things like that, or search pieces, view books, whatever they were called, that prospective college students would get in the mail. That was what I was working on. And oh, don't fall asleep. So I would go on press checks and make sure that the color on those was right. And that was really important for things like people with different skin tones. You don't want one person, you want to make
Yeah.
sure everybody looks realistic and that things aren't too dark or too blown out. And so that's still just part of the workflow.
And I've found that the digital, it looks good sometimes on digital and not when you get them.
Yeah, and it will be influenced too by the printing. So these are essentially high-end color photocopies. And so you can see, well, I don't know about
How
this.
close is that to the Giclées?
This right here is, this color is a little bit blown out. You can see here, I don't know, I'll hold these up if you can really see the difference. There is some color shift that happens because it's just different,
Different ink.
using a big giant Epson printer with 6 ink cartridges, and this is essentially a really high-end color photocopy. So this is toner. So this is ink and this is toner. So this is soaking into the paper. This is sitting on top of the paper. It just is
A little different animal.
yeah. And so I mean, you kind of have to be okay with that too. Okay. Paintbrush, where'd you go? So I'm working a little higgledy-piggledy on this. I'm a little more organized normally.
Higgledy, I love that.
But
Isn't that from a little book? Now, what was your children's book that you said you did a couple of books?
I did 4 children's books for a small press in South Carolina called Arbordale Publishing, and they do science and math picture books. And so that was something I had always wanted to illustrate a children's book ever since I was a kid. And so after my husband and I got married and I was done planning a wedding and I had time, I was like, well, now I want to do this thing. So I started sending my portfolio out, and this was just long enough ago that I was still sending out a paper portfolio. Like I had a website and stuff, but there were still some places that would ask for a paper portfolio. So I applied to maybe just not that many publishers, but I found this particular publisher because I went to the old Borders that used to be in Sand City, and I just sat in the children's book section and I looked at all these picture books and I was like, who's publishing stuff that I would like to do more of? And they had this beautiful book there called Octavia and Her Purple Cloud. And it was this beautifully illustrated book about an octopus that has like every time she makes a cloud of ink, it's not the right color. And so I wrote to them and I sent them my portfolio. And because I had after doing the science illustration program, I did 3 internships, and the third one was for Sally Ride Science, and doing working in their publishing division, doing illustrating middle school science books. And that was when they saw that work and they understood that like I could illustrate scientific concepts, and I could meet a deadline because I had been doing it for a little while. They hired me on to do a day on the mountain, and then that turned into 3 more. And then I was very pregnant when I finished the last one, and I haven't done one since then because they're very, very time. It took me 9 months start to finish to do each one.
Wow.
Actually, I can show you a few of them because it's like 18, well, maybe not 18. I forget how many illustrations it is per book, but they're big.
Aren't they like 32? Oh, no, it's oh,
So
wow.
they're slightly larger than they appear in the book. And so you figure you're doing like 15 of these per book, or 16 maybe.
So
And then
that's
I
a
was
double
doing
page.
cover, and back matter, which is the back part of the book where you have all the, like, this was a book called A Day in the Deep. So it was, you start up at the top and then you go down through all these levels in the ocean. And so the back matter on that was all about different regions of the world and the deepest part of the ocean and things like that. So it's very time consuming. And as I got towards the end of each of those, I was just, it was every waking moment was devoted. And once I had a baby, I was like, I don't think I need to be adding that to my plate right now. I'm working on getting back into that, but slowly, because I am aware of the time commitment. But it is fun to have a big project like that.
Yeah. How much for the artists did you work with the writer or with the publisher?
There's a very what do I want to say? There's a typical way that it happens, which is, I should turn this more. An author submits a manuscript to a publisher, and if it's accepted, then it goes to an editor, and the editor works with the author to clean everything up, and then the author is done until it's time to market the book. And then they pull on an illustrator and they work with someone who is a good fit for the project, who they know can meet a deadline, who is, like their work is in a similar style, and they shepherd that through the whole process. And then maybe at the end, maybe the author and the illustrator work together to promote the book, or maybe not. I haven't met either of the authors that wrote the 4 books that I worked on. One of them lives in the Midwest. They both live in the Midwest. And so it's very, like, you don't submit it, like an author doesn't go find an illustrator unless they're self-publishing. A publisher wants to work with like a professional illustrator who they have already worked with, because for them it's all about getting the project done. Right. So people ask me all the time, they're like, oh, I have an idea for a children's book and you're an illustrator, and I'm like, that's A, not how it works, but B, like, I can't work for free to do it. Takes me so much longer to do my end of the process than it is to, I mean, like, it does take a long time to come up with the concept and write it and like refine it and everything, but compared to the hours it takes to do like 16 big paintings like that, that's a lot of work hours for me. So I can't be doing that for free before it even is shopped around. People are very sad when I tell them that, but
No, I only know part of the process, and I can't tell you how many people. I've never actually published one, but I've used to belong to the Children's Writers and Illustrators Guild. And
yes,
every Tom, Dick, and Harry has a story and
yeah,
has idea. Yeah. And it's like, no, that's not how it works.
yeah, and so I mean, if you are an artist, if you are an author illustrator, then you
Yeah.
can submit things simultaneously. Or if you are self-publishing, you can do whatever you want, but you do need to have the expectation that you're paying an illustrator, and it's a lot of work. So it's a
Do they
big,
pay you per book, per painting, per
you
project?
get an advance against royalties, which is the same way that like music would work as well. So you are paid in advance, which is what allows you to live while you're creating the artwork,
Right.
and then you earn
Minus
that
whatever
back
they
in
make before you
royalties.
get more money, right?
What's that?
Minus whatever, so that will be minus whatever they make until they cover that, and then you get more money.
Right.
Yeah.
So I did my first children's book in 2009, and about a year ago, I got my first royalties check for that book, and it was for $38. So it's not a real lucrative field. I will say that that was a really small press, and they, you know, the woman who is the publisher is also the editor. Her husband is the royalties guy. Like they have a really small crew. Um, and what sort of tipped it over the edge into me actually making anything was that they started printing the books in Spanish and in Chinese. So with those, you know, once they sort of opened up into China, it really opened up a bigger market. And then we were, you know, all of us who had illustrated and written things were then able to start to see the sales tick up quite a lot. So I think my royalty rate is like 6.25. So but that's on you know, each book, let's say the book is like $8.95,
Uh-huh.
what their paperback books cost. So it's like 6.25% of not even $9. Like
Yeah.
how many times do you have to do that? So it's it's you know, you
It
can,
doesn't seem worth it for the time, but it's kind of is.
yeah, I mean, it was a great, like I really loved working on all four of them, and what it did for me was it gave me this big portfolio. It was a big body of work I had
Yeah.
afterwards. Like I have two full drawers in my flat files that are just children's book illustrations. And then, I mean, it's work for hire, so I can't sell it, but I can show it in art shows. I can use it on my website, and it shows that you can carry a project from start to finish. It shows that you can meet a deadline. It shows all of these ways in which you are, you know, you're reliable and you have a style that you work in. So that, as someone who was a relatively new illustrator, you know, I had only been a full-time illustrator for about 18 months when I got that first one. That was really big for me, and it really provided a good, um, like solid foundation for other things.
Yeah. It adds to your repertoire.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Everybody thinks it's an easy thing to do. Oh, just do that.
I mean, it's a lot of, yeah, I mean, also physically, it's a lot. It's a very demanding thing because you are, you know, as you're getting closer to your deadline and you're working really hard on this. If you're painting 4 or 5 hours a day, I mean, that is more. It takes more stamina than people realize to be able to do that. Like it's hard on your hands and your neck and your back, and you know, it's like
Well,
my
how many drawings and concept things did you have to go through before they decided which one they wanted per page or whatever?
They were, it went pretty quickly. So I did a round of thumbnails, which I just had for myself. And so I would do, like, I would just do a bunch of thumbnail sketches, and then I would come back and decide which one I liked. And sometimes I would just take that and like blow it up and then put tracing paper over that and rework it more finely. And then that's what I would send to them. And once they okayed that, then we would go back and forth, and I would send them photos of the artwork in color, and they could be like, well, this area needs this or that. And you have to map out where the text is going to go and that
Right,
kind of thing.
right.
And then once they were done, then they were sent to Ohio, where there was a big drum scanner, because mine were all on the same kind of paper, hot press watercolor paper. So they would use a big drum scanner, and then they would send me the scans, and then inevitably I'd have to fix things. So
Right,
like,
right.
um,
Change that blue to purple and
yeah, the book that I did of undersea creatures, I had done this, oh gosh, what kind of fish? A viper fish? One of these guys with a big underslung jaw, and it's long, narrow, and he's got a big lure.
white.
Well, I had the lure pointing in the wrong direction. Or I had another one where I had painted it, and we had it vetted by a guy at Mbari, and he was like, this fit, you need to pick a fish that would glow blue, not red, because they don't really,
Yeah.
like, I forget which one it was. I either had to change it to blue, or I had to change it from blue to red. And so that was something I was like, it's going to be so much faster for me to do that in Photoshop. So I just had them scan it as is, and then I made the change. I edited it in Photoshop. So there were a lot. I mean, there was a lot of post-production stuff.
You
like
didn't have to you didn't have to paint it out.
No, because it would have, it was so much faster.
Yeah,
And they don't care about, what they care about is that final digital file.
right.
So, and that's the case for a lot of this kind of stuff. I'll do editing. I think it's actually really interesting to have originals that have little errors in them, but I
Yeah.
like being able to fix them when it's going on to be something else. So
Very interesting. We had somebody wanted to know what was the once you get your picture scanned and how do you send it to the sticker people? Do you
you upload a file.
just
So
upload?
yeah, so you go to Mule Sticker, and you have your image, and you have, I think they like a JPEG usually.
Mhm.
So my images are all on a white background, so it was really easy. I mean, I just submitted this exact image, and then they sent me a proof that showed where the margin would be of where they were going to trim.
Gotcha.
So
And was that you ordered like huge amounts or
I think for the first run, I ordered like 100, and I gave them out to people. I gave
Yeah.
them to all my friends and my relatives and stuff, and I said, try them out. Let me know how they work, because I had never done those before.
Mhm.
And so like my entire book club put them all on their water. They all took a picture with all their water bottles with hummingbird stickers on them, and then they would like run them through the dishwasher and leave them outside, and put them on a car window, and then like report back. And once I knew that they were at the quality that the website said that they were, then I went back and ordered more.
more? Did
Yeah.
my daughter-in-law works for Mbari and they ordered very realistic fish from I don't know who. Yeah. Just a couple more minutes, I'm again. Yeah, it's 5 o'clock. But yeah, I have put it on the cup and ran it through the dishwasher. They're great. I wonder
Yeah,
if it's the same printer, yeah.
I'm sure it is. They're like they're who everybody uses, I think.
The mule
Sticker Mule.
sticker
I might
mule,
have said Mule Sticker, but it's Sticker Mule.
sticker mule. Okay.
Yeah. And they'll send you a free bottle of hot sauce when you order stickers, which I think is funny.
What? Hot sauce?
Yeah. It's called Mule Kick hot sauce.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah. I have so anyway, this little demo here is I know not the most finished thing ever, but I just wanted to show how you can use not just acrylic in this sort of watercolor style, but also how you can come back with pencil. And also, this is actually a really dark brown micron. It looks black, but it's dark brown. And I'll use this for things like
Just
a
punching it
deeper
up a little bit.
shadow. Yeah.
When you finish this, will you send us a picture that we could put on our?
Yeah, I tend to be kind of slow. Like I've done some artist in residence programs, and I never finish it while I'm there. But I also have only ever done an artist in residence program with children with me, and there's there's something really awesome about that, because if you're a person who's like looking for bugs and things, then like small children are exactly who you want with you, but
Yeah.
they're not productivity encouraging. So
No, but they're awful fun to have around.
they're pretty great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember we were hiking once in West Texas, and we came across these like young guys, these like fast hikers. And my husband had a kid on his back, and I had one that was, holding on my arm. And we were talking, and I said, "Oh, we're looking for bugs." And they were like, "Well, we haven't seen anything yet." And I was like, "You have not been hiking with a 4-year-old." So, um, anyway, all that to say that I tend to be also, I like when I'm talking and taking my glasses off and getting excited, I'm not very fast, but you can see the direction it's going in. And I wanted to show like the incorporating these things and being able to use acrylic in a way that is maybe a
It
little
really does look like watercolor.
yeah, it's pretty fun. And then I will show you, like just as a comparison to watercolor, these are still a little bit wet, but all this is dry. So you can't really wake it back up. So I could still use these here because they're still
Right.
just,
So that's why you use such a tiny amount.
yeah. So when I've taught classes before, and I've taught, and I'll use wet paint, people will be like, why are you using such a small amount? And I'm like, years of painting in acrylic.
Well, and you're working so finely in your little tiny brushes instead of big sweeping covering area. Well, Erin, I cannot tell you how fun this has been. This is you've given us a lot more information than just painting, and we really appreciate it.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. I feel like all of the things I feel like this is probably true with anybody's job, but like all the things that feel very regular and normal to me in my field that everybody knows, it's always fun to realize that like, oh, that's actually a very specific thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So,
Well, I'm gonna order your A Day in the Deep book for my grandchildren whose mom works for Embari. She'll love
oh
that.
yeah. Yeah. So, oh gosh, I'm forgetting his name. George Matsumoto.
Is that the author?
No, he's the guy at Embari who he actually he was the guy who vetted everything for that book. And so when my daughter we finished that book, and then I had my daughter, and I was still on maternity leave, and he said, "Do you want to come see a vampire squid?" Because that was one of the creatures that I had illustrated. And a vampire, it's not as big as you think it is. It's only like this big, and it was in this super dark, cold room. And so I had a like 4-month-old baby with me, and she was like, "I absolutely do not enjoy this experience." I was really excited, but like very cold, dark places are not baby's favorite places to hang out.
Have
So
you seen the little Dumbo octopus?
we went, yeah, I feel like we went maybe a month or two ago to the aquarium, and we saw whatever their latest exhibit
Yeah,
was.
that's the Embari has a deep water show there, and I think it's gonna be there until January or more. I don't know how long they keep them there, but because we have the trench out there, which is the deepest thing.
We'll do your car tomorrow.
I
Keep talking.
I can come. I got to go pick up my car.
Okay.
I'm gonna leave it to our host to, I think,